All right, this is slide 8. Um, Union beginnings. The Industrial Revolution here we'll see the beginning of unions. Okay, now this comes along when it does really for a reason, because the fact that machines were building things and you needed less people, and because of immigration being so high, there's an abundance of people looking for jobs, gave the workers a big disadvantage. All the power lay with the owner. So the workers have to do something to swing things back to their side. So they start to organize into unions. Now, the whole premise behind a union is that there's strength in numbers. The more people you have in your union, the stronger it is. If one guy goes to the boss and demands a raise, he can point out the window and say, look, there's 100 people standing out there, do the same job you're doing for less, so you're fired. Right? But if the entire workforce belongs to a union and, 1,000 people go in and demand a raise, suddenly the boss has to at least talk to them and listen. So there's strength in numbers in a union. That's the reason a union exists. Right? Now, just because workers organize into a union doesn't mean that owners are simply just going to roll over and do whatever the workers want them to. The owners still have a lot of power, and they have ways to break the power of the unions. There's 5 of them that we're going to name, and you're going to need to know. They're all very short, won't take long. The biggest weapon the workers had, the biggest weapon the union had, was a strike. You could shut down the factory here. You could shut down the goods from being produced, and the owner doesn't make any money. So to fight the strike, the number one union breaker is a scab, S-C-A-B, scab. It's a temporary worker. Right? They were brought in to replace the workers that were on strike. Figuring, well, eventually they'll figure out how to run all these machines and it'll be good. So owners would bring in scabs, temporary workers, to replace the strikers. Number 2, they would use a lockout. And they would simply just lock the doors of the factory and not let the workers in. They figured, fine, you want to go on strike? You're poor, I'm rich. I'm betting I can go longer without income than you can. So they would lock the factory until the workers agreed to come back for what the owner was willing to pay. Okay? Number 3, a yellow dog contract. A yellow dog contract. Okay? And this was when you got a job, you signed a contract with a factory, and part of that contract said that you would agree to never join a union. You agree to never join the union. It's called a yellow dog contract. Like a yellow means cowardly, and a dog who's done something bad, sticks his tail between his legs and crawls away. You're going to have to do the same thing. If you want a job, you're going to have to come crawling, begging for one, willing to give up your right to join a union. Okay. Number 4, a blacklist. And a blacklist was simply a list of all the names of union members, and particularly union leaders. Okay? If you joined the union, your name ended up on a blacklist. You got blacklisted. And all the owners of the companies, because everybody knew who was in the union and who wasn't, the owners would keep a list, and they would trade lists between each of the factory owners. So if you lost your job, you figure, well, that's okay, I'll just get a job at the other factory over there. Well, not so fast. You go apply for a job, and suddenly your name's on the blacklist, you're not getting hired. Okay? Number 5, and this one's particularly interesting, I'm going to take a moment to talk about. Number 5 was a company town. Company town. Okay? In a company town, if you worked for a company, you also had to live in the company housing. The most famous example of this was in Pullman, Illinois. It's outside Chicago. Pullman, Illinois. If you'll think back when we talked about the railroads, the beginning of this unit, George Pullman invented the sleeping car, the dining car. He made his fortune in building railroad cars. Well, he also built his own town outside of Chicago. And if you worked in one of the Pullman factories, you had to live in Pullman, Illinois. And the way that they make sure you live in Pullman, Illinois is the fact that come payday, you weren't paid in regular US dollars. You were paid in something called company scrip. S-C-R-I-P. S-C-R-I-P, company scrip. It's company money. Pullman would print his own money in Pullman bucks, Pullman dollars, right? And he paid you in them. And the only place your money was any good was in Pullman, Illinois. Pullman built this own town. He had his own shops, his own doctors, his own entertainment, everything. So you would get paid in company scrip, and then you would have to go spend it in Pullman stores. You paid your rent in Pullman bucks. So Pullman was out $0 in salary. He didn't pay any salary. He just paid it in his own money that he printed. And then he got all that back. Okay? Now the problem, how this is a union breaker, is you couldn't leave. Once you started working for Pullman, he had you sucked in for life or until he wanted to get rid of you. Now you were free to leave. They didn't have police stopping you. But the problem was you had no money. You can't just quit working for him and take your money and move to Chicago and get a new job. Because the money he's been paying you is not good in Chicago. It's only good in Pullman. So you have no US dollars to live on if you quit working for Pullman. Okay? Now, company towns have since been made illegal, as you can imagine, because of Pullman. Okay? Now, another problem the unions had was that early on, public sentiment was against them. People didn't understand what unions were all about. There was talk going around that unions were socialist. They were anti-American. All this talk of unionizing and all this and that, it's brought over from Europe. Immigrants, Eastern European immigrants, and their crazy socialist ways are bringing these ideas of unions. It's anti-American. No good American belongs to a union. And people just knew that when unions went on strike, stuff didn't get built. And people wanted their stuff. They wanted to go buy their goods. And if they couldn't because you're on strike, the problem's with you, not the company. So the public is against the unions here, as are the courts. All these early cases here, all these other early monopoly cases, all that, almost always decided in favor of the company, not the workers, right? It's going to be a little while before we get to a president and courts that will support the workers. Almost always early on here in the days of unions, the courts supported the companies, not the workers. Right? So, now that we know some of the problems they're trying to overcome, let's talk about some of the unions here. The first one is called the National Labor Union. Okay. Early on, by 1872, there were over 30 different unions around the country. Problem was then nobody's working toward the same thing. And if there's strength in numbers, everybody's divided up into their own little union. The National Labor Union tries to take all these little independent unions, the bricklayers, the carpenters, the plumbers, the typesetters, the shoemakers, you name it, right? Tries to take all these unions and join them together under one national labor union. Good idea. Didn't really work in practice, though. They accepted skilled and unskilled workers, meaning skilled, you've learned a trade, you're a carpenter, you're a plumber, you're a mason, you're a blacksmith, you're whatever, and unskilled, meaning the factory workers who don't know a particular trade. So they took both skilled and unskilled laborers, but they excluded a lot of people. Immigrants, in particular Chinese, they don't like. They didn't allow blacks to join. They didn't allow women to join. So if the theory is there's strength in numbers, the National Labor Union kind of screwed themselves here when they cut the number of people that were allowed to join. There's also the problem of the economy. The economy has taken a huge hit, and we're going to see this over and over and over this year. Okay? That when the economy's great and everybody's making money and everybody's got a job, they care a lot about social causes. When the economy's terrible, they don't care about social causes. All they care about is, do I have a job? Good. I made money today. I hope I have a job tomorrow. They don't have time to get involved in union activities. So the National Labor Union will come to an end. The next one that comes along is called the Knights of Labor. And notice it's Knights with a K, as in knights in shining armor and all that. The Knights of Labor. Okay? This one is founded in the late 1870s by a man named Terence Powderly. Terence Powderly. And here you see the political cartoon. Terence Powderly sitting on a powder keg at the United States Magazine. A magazine is where ammunition is stored and weapons. So a powder keg outside of where weapons and ammunition are is a very dangerous thing. And Terence Powderly was known as one of the most dangerous men in America because he was the head of the Knights of Labor and extremely powerful. They welcomed skilled and unskilled, men and women, whites and blacks, nationals and immigrants, you name it. They opened the doors. They learned the lesson from the National Labor Union and opened the doors to anybody and everybody that wanted to join. Membership would eventually be over 1 million people. Okay. Now, women could play, not only be a member, they could play leadership roles in the Knights of Labor. In fact, a later leader after Powderly goes away, dies, a woman actually takes control and leads the Knights of Labor. Her name was Mary Harris Jones. She was known as Mother Jones. Okay? And Mother Jones was a very powerful leader to the Knights of Labor. Okay? Now, the Knights here had a very interesting sort of concept. Right? They did not believe in socialism, where the government owns all the factories. They don't want the government to own the factories. They believe in something called owner-producers, where the workers themselves, the producers of the goods, would be the owners of the factory. The workers would own the factory. And because they are expecting themselves to become not just workers, but owners as well, they lacked a class consciousness. They didn't see there being a wealthy owning class and a poor working class. They just saw one class, the owner-producers. The workers become the owners. So they never saw themselves as being a permanent working class that has to organize to get what it wants. They saw themselves as being the owning class and the working class. There would just be one class. So there's no, oh, they're the rich or, oh, they're the poor. We're all the same. Okay? So it's a weird mix of sort of some socialist beliefs that everybody's equal, but not socialist in that they wanted the government to own everything. They wanted the workers to own everything. And in our last slide that we're going to get to next, we'll continue the story of the Knights of Labor.